Good morning. On the first day of our New Year programming, you're going to hear some of the incredible nightmare story of one Thomas Sophonow, who is at last free from a charge of murder. And he was freed because of the incredibly wrongful conviction by courts in Manitoba. Here is the basic scene in Manitoba, the coffee shop where Barbara Stoppel, a 16-year-old girl, was strangled and died a few days later. And there were a number of eyewitnesses or near eyewitnesses, and here is the man who was composited together as the cowboy killer. Now, I want you to look at the man who was wrongly convicted, Tom Sophonow of Vancouver. And Tom is going to give us some of his incredible nightmare of experiences on the program today. You can't say on a lighter side, but the annual appearance today is of Kenneth Dye, the Auditor General of Canada, a Vancouver man who chronicles with great regularity horror stories of waste and incompetence. This year, his target still is to get at the full details of the documents and the evaluation of the purchase of Petrofina by Petrofina. And it may well be that it's something close to $1 billion more than we were originally told. Kenneth Dye, the Auditor General. Now, to keep us up to date in the story of hookers on the streets of Vancouver and what the police are going to do now that C-49 is in effect, in place, and can be used, is Inspector Harold Brittain, head of the Vice Squad of the city of Vancouver. But first this morning, the man with the horror stories, the man fighting Mulroney and Wilson for access to documents on your behalf, Kenneth Dye, the Auditor General, after the break. Kenneth Dye is the Auditor General of Canada. He's one of the fully free men in the country who can say what he likes and look at almost anything he wants to protect the expenditure of our tax money. But before we come to billion-dollar deals, the ordinary people like to know the nasty little things in your report. Now, tell me about this ludicrous posh club in Hong Kong, which these benighted civil servants gave to themselves, paying $773,000, was it, in initiation fees for a fancy club?
That's right. It was about $22,000 per Canadian-based diplomat and staff man in Hong Kong.
Well, describe the place to me.
Well, I have never seen it. I've been in Hong Kong, but I've never seen this club. But I've
they'd be frightened to ask you to go and see it for a start.
Well, I'd be concerned today, I guess, if I went to Hong Kong. I gather it's very attractive. It's a very high-quality recreational club.
Hong Kong Yacht and Recreation Club. How many diplomats? Was it 34 for whom we paid memberships in it?
Well, that was not only the diplomats, but the entire staff, all the clerical people as well. So it's the whole Canadian-based staff in Hong Kong.
In Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And is Hong Kong, do tell me, regarded as a hardship posting?
Well, it is by the External Affairs. They have a point system. They use 100 points. And I think they score Hong Kong with 25 points, which is at the very bottom of their list of hardship posts.
And give me that again. They each paid $22,000 in initiation fees?
And about $700 a year for membership dues.
Who authorized this gross waste of public money for underworked civil servants, my term?
Well, this is where it all comes down to. Is I think they should have sought permission from the Treasury Board. There was a fund set up so that in hardship posts there could be some relief given to our overseas staff. And they went and spent, in this particular case, $773,000 odd, which was about a quarter of the whole fund, a little less than a quarter. They had about $4 million.
For the whole world?
For the whole world, for all the posts, and on their first acquisition of recreational facilities, they took $773,000 out of $4 million and change.
No authorization?
Well, authorized within the department, but my view is it should have been authorized by Treasury Board. It contravenes a lot of Treasury Board rules.
What have you recommended on this?
That they they learn from their experience and not do it again, and be absolutely certain when they make that kind of expenditure that it has the proper authority and common sense prevails.
You're not going to ask them to pay the money back to the poor, hard-pressed taxpayer of Canada who strongly objects to buying fancy, posh, exclusive clubs for civil servants?
The government has said that they're going to look into ways of disposing of these transferable debentures.
Now let's get on to business. What about your battle with Mulroney and with Crosby? Are you still denied complete access for the documents you want on the evaluation of the Petrofina purchase by one of Petrocan's subsidiaries?
Yes, yes. Mr. Crosby announced some initiatives the other day, but I don't really think they're going to change very much. I don't believe that we're going to get any additional information. If we do, I'll be delighted, but I'm not going to get, in his terms, any more cabinet documents, which is, of course, what we've been seeking. I want to get the pre-acquisition analysis when Petrocan set out to buy Petrofina.
But I thought you already had authority for that and a decision on that, did you not?
Parliament says I can have it. The Federal Court of Canada, Judge Jerome, says I can have it. Mr. Crosby doesn't think I should have it.
And they're now appealing this decision again?
Yes, we're back in court.
But you see, as a believer in democracy and all the rest of it, I might say, well, to you, if I were Crosby, look, I don't want Dye snooping around the political discussions in Cabinet in which we have a free-for-all discussion about the benefits or otherwise of buying Petrocan from a political point of view.
I agree with Mr. Crosby. We have never, ever in the last century of operations in my office ever asked for that type of political document. We've never asked for minutes. We've never asked for documents where there's attribution of one minister to another. So to me, this is all a big red herring.
You've made that perfectly and lucidly clear all the way through.
I've said it 500 times publicly.
You don't know what, you don't want to know what Carney said to Mulroney and Mulroney said to Crosby, or Crosby said to McGraw?
I'd like to have the pre-acquisition analysis. That's where I want to get started.
Well, let me get that, pre-acquisition analysis. You want to get the documents on which the evaluation was prepared for which we paid $1.7 billion for Petrofina.
Plus the use of the tax system for a few $100 million more. When the deal was being discussed in Parliament, I think it was Mr. Lalonde at the time, who was, I believe at that time, Minister of Energy, stood up and said the pre-acquisition analysis had been done, sufficient, and Parliament, you can be assured that we've done our homework. We're intending to proceed. I want that analysis, please.
In other words, Lalonde made it clear that there is such an evaluation report there.
It appeared so. We've asked for the document he referred to.
And they won't give it to you?
Well, we don't know if it exists.
But he said it.
He said it exists.
They'd done an analysis. Now, the other point you raised just now, though, is threaded through your report about, can I use the word fiddle? Tax fiddles. Tax benefits, tax remissions.
Using this tax expenditure system, yeah.
How is that used, in your view, perhaps even improperly?
Well, a tax expenditure is a revenue foregone to the public treasure chest, and we don't have certain numbers of taxes which do not come in because of quite legal means, and in my view, quite appropriate in many cases. For example, I, like many taxpayers, would be interested in the MERBs. Lots of people bought MERBs in order to defer their taxes. There's all kinds of ways in which you can defer your tax or reduce your income tax, and those deductions or reductions are tax expenditures. In this case, one of them this year was the use. I think we've determined it was $400 or $500 million used by the tax expenditure system in order to make the Petrofina deal go. When the vendors were selling their shares, they had a pretty good idea that they were going to save a lot of taxes as well.
Oh, in other words, when the deal was made, they were going to get $1.7 billion plus a tax remission of between $400 and $500 million.
Well, in their case, they didn't get a tax remission, which is the government saying you don't have to pay your taxes. That's what Dome got. On Hudson's Bay Oil and Gas got. That was another deal. That was $1 billion. But on the Petrofina one, it's a matter of using the system so taxes are either deferred or not paid. In the Petrofina case, nobody got any tax, as far as I can determine, either the Canadian government or the Belgian government. So there's quite a stack of dollars in that one.
In other words, we lost another $400 or $500 million as Canadian taxpayers.
We're not finished the audit yet because we can't get the information, but we think
But once you get the evaluation document, that evaluation document, if it exists or still exists, will show you what the cash price was, what the tax deal was, and what the independent evaluators of anyway said it was really worth.
Let's hope so.
And you can find out whether or not it was a good buy or a bad buy of Canadian tax with Canadian tax.
We can also see whether there was a process followed. I mean, they could have got a good price through dumb luck, or they could have achieved a bad price and been very rigorous and done all the right things, and the deal could have been poor in the end. Well, I would be very sympathetic to somebody who tries to do something right, but for one reason or another, the deal doesn't come
So
through.
now, is it still a deadlock and a standoff between Dye, one side, Mulroney and Crosby on the other side?
Well, the Conservatives have said that they're going to obey the law in the future, and that's good. I wish they would be more compliant and obey the law for 1985, 84, 83, and 82, and give me the information that I'm entitled to. In fact, I have a responsibility to get in order to do my job for Parliament. They're going to deny me the information unless they lose this appeal.
The Prime Minister has said you can have the information.
Well, that's what he used to say.
The federal court has said you can have the information.
Yes.
Don't they have to obey the orders of the federal court?
We have a declaration from the courts saying this is what the law says, and the law says we're entitled to the information. The court decision does not force them to give us to. It's not a mandamus. There's no compliance attached. It's only an interpretation of the law.
It's advice from the federal court?
Yes.
Which they've said, the hell with you.
Looks like they want to fight it.
How long will this go on? How many years do you have to serve?
Well, you know, this is really the problem. It seems that justice deferred is justice denied, isn't it? This has been going on. The purchase was 81, and the audit started in 82.
Will you keep up the fight?
Well, I think I should see it through. When an auditor starts down an audit trail, he gets to the end one way or the other.
You can't back off.
I don't think I have a right to. I have a responsibility to finish this.
More with Kenneth Dye, the Auditor General, after the break. Since you became Auditor General on April Fool's Day 1981, would you say that you have seen a significant implementation of all your various recommendations?
Not all, but there is improvement. You know, each year our report tends to be seen as negative. In fact, there's quite a few complimentary things in there. I think that we are seeing progress. Accountability is improving in such a huge system. You know, it's going to take a while to get it to where I believe it ought to be, but the Crown Corporation situation, that one is improving vastly in my view. It looks like the financial statements of Canada are finally going to look like a good set of financial statements that are understandable.
By that you mean accounting-wise. You're not talking about our horrendous deficits or the government's plans to reduce the rate of growth of the deficit.
Well, it'd be nice to know what the deficit is. You know, I'd like to see the beans all counted in one jar so we can determine what the deficit really is, what the revenue really is, what expenditure really is, and what the debt is.
Are you telling me that we don't know that at this moment?
No. Well, you can patch it all together if you're a very sophisticated accountant. I think it should be very accessible to the media, to the politicians, to the average citizen, and I think it's possible. And in fact, I think we're going to get closer to it in the next few years.
The next few years?
Yes.
But take a thing like DRE, which is widely regarded, and forgive my extravagant language, but it always has been a kind of billion-dollar slush fund.
There's a lot of discretionary expenditure in there.
I say slush fund, and you say a lot of discretionary expenditure.
Well, I'm Parliament's auditor.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, are there things in DRE which you feel are really beyond the scope of normal administration?
Well, there's a lot of involvement by political people, and I think that's probably proper because of the system. There's a lot of pressure from provincial governments, from municipalities, from industries, from individuals, corporations, on ministers in order to achieve some particular end in a particular constituency. And so it is a political process. Now, there are criteria and programs, and you say under this program you can have funds for such and so. Our finding is that the rules are badly bent at times in order to provide funding for projects that ministers believe are important.
But that's the way the system works. If a minister wants to do some incredible work, we'll say, wants to buy and keep open a refinery in Quebec, I'm not talking about the current case, they can use, or anyone else, they might conceivably want to give something to British Columbia, which they can bend the rules to give under DRE.
Yes. Yes, they would try to find a program that fits the circumstances. My experience is that if they can't quite find the exact program, they bend it a little bit. You'll get a lot of provincial subsidiary agreements that are, for example, to assist the private sector. And then there'll be all kinds of public sector activities in there. They're not eligible for those kind of programs.
Yeah, they can be used as kind of subsidies for the rich, socialism for the rich kind of thing.
You get a lot of favorite projects by people who have influence.
Now, take airports, for instance. We were told this country's in a dreadful financial state and that we're going to cut back, but it seems from your report that Mazankowski is spending money like there was no tomorrow on airports. What do you say to that?
The case that we raised was the Hamilton Airport, which was before Mr. Mazankowski's time. And in that particular one, the volume of activity was declining. And yet the government went ahead and built a vastly superior airport for a volume that's no longer justified.
Can you make an assessment as auditor as to whether or not the expenditure is economically desirable, or do you merely look at the authorities under which they spend the money?
Oh no, we look at the value for money too, and try and relate the need to the expenditure.
So the Hamilton Airport was one in which you did not believe that the money expended related to the need for expenditure?
Well, we had lots of evidence of airline traffic patterns at all the airports across the country. The airports basically are supposed to recover their costs. No, they don't. I think there's only two that do, Toronto and Vancouver. And the rest of them lose varying amounts of money. We've got a table in our report here showing how much per passenger they lose.
And is it not a fact that costs at some Canadian airports are vastly higher than costs at U.S. airports?
Yes, it is. We made some comparative studies between Canada and the U.S. Most of the opportunities for savings there are in the multiple use of staff. For example, in the Canadian airport, we have our snow removal crew who wait for the snow to fall and then remove the snow. In the American case, they might also be the firefighters or the maintenance men. They have multiple duties, and therefore labor costs are lower.
Mind you, if I were the Tory government, I'd be hesitant about laying off people for any reason, certainly in Western Canada, wouldn't you?
Well, I think the strategy is going to be to sell the airports to the municipal authorities or to whoever wants to buy them and get them out of the federal public system.
But you said, as I recall in your report, that $20 million extra was spent on air traffic controllers' salaries when they've been surplus to requirement.
Well, the problem is an imbalance between airports. Some places they have controllers on overtime, and other places they've got too many controllers.
Last year you talked quite bluntly about abuses in immigration, in which you said the system was such that it was almost impossible to select an immigrant who was going to make a contribution to Canada. And you complained in very strong language about the abuse of family unification by courier parents. I won't go into details. Have you any follow-up on that this year?
Not in detail on the courier parent issue. I'm not exactly certain what the status is. It's not been an issue. We did follow up on immigration this year. And frankly, I forget whether we touched on courier parents in that follow-up remark or not.
I think you had a section in your report saying that the department couldn't find much evidence of the abuse by courier parents, although it seems...
Well, that's my recollection. It was not an issue this year.
So now, your target for tomorrow is back into court to hammer the government to get your evaluation documents on Petrofina and Petrofina.
Well, I'd like to finish the darn audit. This has been going on too long, and I don't relish going back to court. But if I have to, if this government doesn't believe that the law should be followed, then I think I have to press my point.
Well, does this kind of issue come to a point where you quit over it?
I have no intentions of quitting. I would prefer to live in Vancouver with all your beautiful scenery here and your good snow at Whistler, but I'm enjoying my responsibilities in Ottawa. I think I'll stick it out.
And your function is to keep after them until finally you get access to evaluation documents, and then you'll be happy until the next crisis.
Well, there's always something going on.
My thanks to Kenneth Dye, the Auditor General of Canada. One of these days, he might get the document, if it exists, which can tell him whether or not Petrofina was a reasonable buy. We don't expect governments to make good buys, do we?
Well, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
My thanks to Kenneth Dye. Next, Thomas Sophonow, after the break.
Okay. Right here, Jack. I gotta read these audio tapes live. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, hello, hello.
On March the 12th, 1982, policemen came to see Tom Sophonow in Vancouver, questioned him, and without him being charged at that time, he was taken to Winnipeg, where he was charged with a murder. Now, After one hung jury, 2 convictions, there was an acquittal by the Manitoba Court of Appeal after he had spent 3 years and 9 months in jail. And the acquittal was obviously very proper, because if ever a man was wrongfully convicted, it was Tom Sophonow. 2 short questions at the moment. Did you kill Barbara Stopples?
No.
Let's see now Steve Wyatt's recap of the Sophonow nightmare, which will be up right now.
It's 2 days before Christmas, 1981. Police are called to a donut shop in Winnipeg where a young girl has been found dead. She is 16-year-old Barbara Stoppel. She had been a waitress in the donut shop. Her body was found crumpled on the bathroom floor. Evidence shows that she had been strangled to death with a green and yellow cord. And so began one of Canada's most baffling murder cases. One witness testifies later that he saw a man leave the donut shop and chased him over a bridge, but he backed off and the man pulled out a knife. He saw the man later throw something over the bridge. Police later recovered a pair of gloves. They produced this composite drawing of a man who had become known as a cowboy killer. They were under intense public pressure to find Barbara Stoppel's murderer. 3 months after the murder, an arrest is made in Vancouver. The suspect is Thomas Sophonow. 2 days after his 29th birthday, he is charged with second-degree murder. Sophonow used to live in Winnipeg and was known to police who identified him in the composite drawing. They did not believe Sophonow when he told them he was on the other side of town at the Canadian Tire store getting his car fixed, and later at the Safeway store buying Christmas stockings for children to give to them at the hospitals.
I was wondering why he was buying all these stockings, because, you know, he seemed like such a rough-looking guy and didn't look like the type to be buying stuff like that. So I asked him why he, you know, what he was doing with them, and he said he was buying them for kids in the hospital who couldn't go home for Christmas. So I looked at him and I thought, boy, what a nice guy, you know, because he shocked me because he didn't look like that kind of a guy.
Then he returned to the Canadian Tire store, and this telephone, a record showed that he made a call to his mother in Vancouver close to the time of the murder. It was the most important phone call of his life. The trial later brought questions up about the use of police lineups. A key witness in the case, the man who chased Sophonow, alleged to be Sophonow, over the bridge, couldn't pick out the man in this police lineup. That man, the key witness, was later picked up on a traffic violation. While in prison, he asked the guard to take him to see the man who had been charged in the murder case. Later, in the police lineup again, he identified Sophonow. That identification in the subsequent trial was dismissed by the judge. In his ruling, the judge pointed out that when the guard took him to see the man on March 15th, Dirksen, the key witness, knew he was being taken to see the man charged with the murder. Dirksen's identification of the accused was terribly suspect, if not totally discredited. Sophonow finally spent 3 different trials in the courthouse in Winnipeg. The first time, it was a hung jury. After 2 convictions, it was finally overturned by the Court of Appeal. Now questions are being raised about why certain evidence was not brought up in court.
What about being thorough once you've talked to the man and finding out, for instance, what he did at the time he hung up the phone at the Canadian Tire store? What's wrong with looking at the invoices of Tom Sophonow's car repairs, and then the people before him and after them, and finding out about the Canadian Tire store and the Safeway store and all those other events? Why would they not do that? Why was it that my investigator was the one who had to find the repair bill from the Canadian Tire store? And why was it the police never saw it until a Crown attorney handed them a copy that I had given to him?
Tell the truth now. Are you in any way responsible?
All through his ordeal, Sophonow wanted to be tested by a polygraph examiner, that is, undergo a lie detector test. He was finally given that opportunity last night on CTV's W5 program.
My opinion was that Tom Sophonow was telling the truth when he denied any and all criminal involvement related to the strangulation, slaying in 1981 of Barbara Stoppel.
Our investigators, and I go along with what they have in their report, feel that they brought the proper man before the courts.
Would you like to see a 4th trial?
I think there should be a 4th trial, yes.
That would be unprecedented in this country.
Well, we're not trying to set a precedent here. We're just trying to get the answer.
Well, Tom Sophonow, what do you think of the attitude by the Winnipeg Chief of Police that he would, after one hung jury, 2 convictions, and a clear acquittal by the Manitoba Court of Appeal, that they would like to see you back for a 4th trial? What do you have to say to that this morning?
I think that's a deliberate insult to the intelligence of the Court of Appeal. And I really have nothing to say about him personally.
But you're quite confident and happy now that you're finally finished with this whole caper, because you have written to the Minister of Justice, have you not? What have you asked him to do?
To direct the Solicitor General into a investigation, having the RCMP investigate the city police, the conduct of the police, why I was arrested and in prison for 45 months. It's completely ludicrous.
And beyond that, I presume you want them to investigate all the lack of investigation on your alibi witnesses, which you attempted to get in front of the courts at the right times.
The RCMP are individuals quite capable of thoroughly investigating something that they were told to investigate.
But on the other hand, Tom, let me put something to you. Is there not, and I say you were obviously, on the basis of the documents, wrongfully convicted, no shadow of doubt about that. Was there not an incredible resemblance between the cowboy killer and yourself? I'm talking about the composite picture of the cowboy killer and you.
No.
You don't see that incredible resemblance I saw this morning?
No. Matter of fact, during my first trial, George Dangerfield, the Crown, questioned me about the composite drawing, and I asked him for it because of a comment that the police said that I said. And after taking the composite drawing from the Crown, I walked out of the witness box, I gave it to the jury, I said, I'll leave it up to the jury whether I said that or not. He repeatedly asked me if I said that to the police, what they said, and I said no. Simple. I left it up to the jury. I just walked out, I gave it to the jury, let them decide.
No, that wasn't the point I was making. I was merely showing the similarity between the composite drawing and yourself with a cowboy hat on.
No, I don't see any similarities
You don't see
whatsoever.
that at all?
No, I'm sorry.
But there were many other things that the police did to you which you regard as unfair. In Vancouver, for instance. Is that not a fact?
That's a fact.
Did they ever... Who was it that interviewed you in Vancouver? Was it the city police or the Winnipeg police?
City police, first of all, and the Winnipeg police followed.
Let's go to the Winnipeg police. Did the Winnipeg police take a statement from you, show you the statement, check it with you, and let you sign it?
No. Their reasoning for that, as they had testified in court under oath, is that they feared that I would take the notebook, rip it up, and eat it.
You're joking.
No, they testified. Detective Sergeant Edward Polishin of the Winnipeg Police Force, detective for 16 years, stood there and said, I feared that he was going to take the notebook, rip it up, and eat it. That is why I did not have him sign it. That is why I did not read it to him, to corroborate any of the things that are written down in his notebook.
And in the course of that statement, they had asked you if you'd been in Winnipeg at that time, and you had said?
Yes, I believe I was, yeah.
And had you been in a donut shop, and you had said?
I was in a donut shop, a Tim Horton donut shop.
And what was the donut shop that Barbara was killed in? It was an Ideal donut shop.
That's correct.
And how far are these donut shops apart?
I'd say approximately 15 miles.
15 miles.
Yeah.
And did you at that time give them an account of your evening, where you'd been and what you'd done?
Basically, yes.
Did the police ever go over your ground in Winnipeg and attempt to verify your alibis to your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, the Winnipeg police did go to the hospitals and, in fact, through the evidence of the second trial, confiscated a Christmas stocking from the St. Boniface Hospital from a terminally ill child's bed. The evidence that came out was a nurse from the St. Boniface Hospital who remembered the occurrences of what came up.
We're going to go into details of what you actually did that night and what witnesses you had, because the Court of Appeal in the final analysis said the failure of the judge to allow your alibi evidence to be introduced was one of the great wrongs in your conviction. Is that not correct?
That was the 99%
So
judgment.
here you are with a man with alibis, and the alibis were not presented in the the hung jury, and the third trial, which led to a conviction.
Yes.
And you now feel totally and absolutely a free man.
As soon as the Minister of Justice directs the Solicitor General for an investigation, after their report, then I will be a totally free man.
More with Tom Sophonow, a Vancouver man who went through 3 years and 9 months of a nightmare after the break. The Sophonow family stood by Tom all the way. As a matter of fact, some time ago, Sister Irene Johnson phoned me and asked me if we'd do something about it. And while I didn't brush her off, I was kind of unenthusiastic, was I not?
You were.
How do you feel now?
Very happy.
Do you think that he was really totally unfairly treated? Or was there any colour of right in what the police did and the Crown did at any time?
No. I feel he was very wrongly dealt with.
Badly treated and wrongly convicted.
Right.
Did you not at some time think, we're going to lose it, he's going to go away for life with no parole for 10 years, which was his sentence on the second and third trials?
Yes.
Now, I'll tell you what I want to do with you, Tom. You tell me, what time did the Crown allege the murder was when the proceedings started, on the night of December the 23rd?
The proceedings started at the preliminary hearing and the first trial. The time was set at shortly after 8 o'clock.
Right.
Crown witness, Lorraine Janover, stated that it is her habit to take a coffee break at that time, and she went to the donut shop, and the guy was in there, and it was shortly after 8 o'clock. Out with the Canadian Tire, 7:52, 7:56.
Leave it for a moment, though. 8 o'clock. Did the times change in the Crown's case as the various trials progressed, different
Yes.
trials?
Yes, they did.
What times did the times change to?
The second trial was 8:15.
The third trial?
Was 8:25, 8:30.
Now, you must have been very suspicious of that because your particular movements were pinned down precisely that you were in Canadian Tire at 7:52.
That's right.
How did anyone know that?
How did anyone know that?
Yes.
The telephone records of the BC Tel.
Showed that at 7:52,
Yes.
from a phone near Canadian Tire, in Canadian
Yes.
Tire,
Yes.
you phoned your mother in Vancouver.
That's right.
So you were then and there. So at around 8 o'clock, the original allegation of murder time, you were on the telephone to your mother.
That's right.
No dubiety about that.
No, the Crown submitted it as factual evidence.
The Crown did that.
Yes.
All right. Now, later then, after you left Canadian Tire, what did you do?
After I left Canadian Tire, after my car was fixed, I went to the Victoria Hospital.
Why were you getting your car fixed?
I had a problem with my front end tire, and I was going to Mexico for my holiday, and I was outside of the city limits, and I encountered these problems with my car, and I really didn't want to get stuck in the States.
So you came back to Canadian Tire to get your car fixed?
Yes.
Right. Now, when did you go to the Safeway store where that witness was very impressed with you buying the 99-cent Christmas stockings? How many did you buy?
About 45.
Now, why did you do that? Why did you go in? Because the Crown, I think, suggested vaguely that you were trying to set up an alibi after you'd done the killing. Did they not indicate that?
They suggested it.
All right. Why did you go and buy 45 little Christmas stockings sealed up 99 cents apiece?
Because I have a habit of doing things like that for 8-10 years. So it isn't unusual for me to do similar things of this nature.
You'd done it in Vancouver?
Yes.
You'd never done it before in Winnipeg?
No, it was Christmas time. I already had my mind made up that I was going to drive back to Vancouver, and I estimated my time of arriving in Vancouver Christmas Day, so I would not be able to get an opportunity.
All
So I
right.
did
So
in
you
Winnipeg.
took your little bags of Christmas stockings and you went first to which hospital?
Victoria.
And what happened in that hospital? You didn't go in and see the children.
No.
You
I
went
met
to whom?
I met a nurse and at the Victoria Hospital. She directed me to the St. Boniface, Misericordia, and the Grace Hospital, being en route to Vancouver, out to the city. And she explained to me,
When you first went into the first hospital, you took them a number of little Christmas stockings and
Yes.
you gave it to a clerk. Is that right?
there was no maternity. There was a maternity ward. It wasn't a children's hospital, a Victoria Hospital. There is no children's ward. It's just strictly maternity.
Now, a witness arose out of that meeting, did it not?
Yes.
Who was the witness?
Ms. Joan Barrett.
And what was her evidence?
Her evidence is that she has a habit of, after visiting hours, to take the reports and everything downstairs. Her habit
But she saw you at what time?
between 8:10 and 8:30, and I stayed there for approximately 10 minutes.
Did you tell the police about that?
I told the court of,
I mean, was she called as a witness by the Crown?
no, she wasn't. No,
She wasn't.
no.
Now, in your other visits to the other hospitals, you also met some other nurses who later remembered you.
Yes.
Who found them as witnesses?
The Crown found some presented at my first trial and suppressed the rest. The second trial and the third trial, the defense presented the nurses.
But at the third trial, when you were convicted for the second time, did the judge not exclude the alibi evidence?
Yes.
All of the alibi evidence?
Except Ms. Joan Barrett. He found a foundation to establish the evidence of Joan Barrett. The Crown alleged that Joan Barrett confabulated her evidence, and we called her husband, Roy Barrett, to support her testimony.
Now, we can't go into all the details, but the man who did the killing was followed from the donut shop by a witness called Dirksen. Is that right?
That's correct.
Tell me what Dirksen's evidence was about you, about the killer, please forgive me. That he had gone to a bridge.
Yes. He
Struggled with him.
He cared for Barbara Stoppel. He went as far as to say that he loved her. When he was viewing the guy in the donut shop, he left, went around the back, stopped following him. He stopped at Domo gas station, picked up a baseball bat, viewed the guy in the middle of the bridge throwing something over. He decided that he could handle the fellow. He threw the bat away, went on the bridge, struggled with him. The fellow pulled a knife, and they separated. After that, he went to the foot of the bridge. He viewed police cars, ambulances, everything, lights flashing all over the place. And for an individual who really loved or cared for this girl, he hopped in a cab, drove around a little bit, and went home and got drunk.
Never did anything else at all?
No.
Now, at that time, a box had been thrown over.
That's right.
What did the police find in that box?
There was a box, a pair of gloves, and twine.
Forget the twine for the moment. The gloves.
Yes.
The gloves, presumably, were the gloves thrown away by the killer.
Yes.
Did the police ever ask you, or did the Crown and Court ever ask you to try on the gloves?
No.
Who asked you to try on the gloves?
My defense lawyer, Greg Brodsky.
What happened when you tried on the gloves?
Well, he came up to about here. No.
No way they fitted you. When this man Dirksen said he was going to tackle the killer and took the baseball bat and then said he didn't need it, how tall is Dirksen?
I would say
Up to where?
at the preliminary hearing, we went and measured each other, and I guess he's up to my chest.
Up to your chest?
Yes.
So if it had been you, he would have needed the baseball bat to deal with you, right?
Yes.
These are the things that fascinate me, you know, because people will say, yeah, Christmas, Santa Claus, that sounds funny. But the gloves didn't fit you.
The gloves didn't fit me. They, in fact, had a fiber from Barbara Stoppel's sweater to link the gloves to the sweater that she wore. Mm-hmm. The material type gloves, they had holes in them, which would obviously leave fingerprints in their...
Next, I want to talk to you about the identification system used by the Winnipeg police in connection with you being identified as the suspect after the break. What I'm doing with Tom Sophonow, who is finally acquitted after a hung jury, 2 convictions, Supreme Court of Canada, and an acquittal by the Manitoba Court of Appeal in the bluntest and most forthright language imaginable, is going through some of what are the obvious defects in the police investigation. No signatures in the statements because they thought he would eat them. No investigation of the repair at Canadian Tire until your lawyer gave them the receipts. Is that right?
That's correct.
No proper investigation of your alibi case.
None whatsoever.
How did Joan Barrett come? That was a woman who said she saw you between 8:10 and 8:20 at the hospital. How did she come to be a witness?
She read in the paper after the first trial that the Crown was going to call nurses to take the stand. She was waiting, and the police never came down. After that, she went to her minister because she spoke to her minister on December 23rd, around December 23rd, the Christmas of '81. She went to her minister. She asked her minister what to do. The minister directed her to see the lawyer and not to go to the police. That saved my life.
Yeah, I can believe that. Now we come to we've covered the gloves. Now we come to the evidence of a number of convicts. Which trials did they appear at? Did you ever confess to any convict or say anything liable to be interpreted as a confession to anybody while you were in the remand centres or in police custody?
No.
No?
No.
Never?
Never.
Did you talk about it at all?
What is there to confess to?
Did you talk about the injustice you were suffering?
Yes.
You were
Openly.
saying you felt you had been framed.
Yes.
Words to that effect.
Yes.
Tell me about the witnesses that gave evidence. The convicts. There were what? 2 of them gave evidence?
3 of them.
3 of them. Tell me about them.
Thomas Chang had 30 charges dropped and had a voluntary departure instead of a immigrated
Deportation. And he testified against you that you had said that you had killed Barbara Stoppel.
Yes.
And he was the guy you say with 28 to 30 charges who gave this evidence. Could he speak English?
Sort of, yes. Yes, he wasn't fluent in the English language.
And then he has since left the country.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Who was the next one?
A fellow by the name of Douglas Martin. He had, well, it was ridiculous, the charges of perjury and conviction of perjuries of other trials that he testified in.
Are you telling me, as was said in W5 last night, that they brought a man with a perjury conviction to testify against you that you had confessed the murder to him?
Yes.
Or within his hearing of some kind?
Yes.
And the next, was there another one?
Oh, yeah. Another fellow, he testified that he wanted, I think, $5,000 to give evidence, and there's something that I can't say because it wasn't in evidence.
Right.
That goes along with that.
You must have been right out of your mind at this stage of the game. I don't mean you were crazy, but the pressures and the tensions of seeing this evidence coming forward must have been incredibly frightening.
Mind-boggling.
Absolutely mind-boggling. How did you feel after the hung jury? I suppose you thought, well, that's it, did you? First time round.
No, the hung jury wasn't too bad, because we didn't know which way it went. We were all sort of saying, 1 against, 11-4. The second trial, very bad. I couldn't understand why, he would get guilty. Third trial, the same. And what I felt bad for is every time I went and asked for somebody to help me, everybody turned a deaf ear.
Where did you go to ask people to help?
Well, I came here, and I went to the papers, and I went to my MLA, Sven Robinson, and then finally to Claire Calhane, and she's the one that helped me.
She gave you more encouragement than anybody else.
Or it's just support, for our family.
Not making any apologies, but when it happens away off and far off Winnipeg and you don't know the details of the trial, one tends to assume that, well, this guy was in Winnipeg after all that night. Why were you in Winnipeg in any case?
I was going on my holidays, and I had an opportunity to take some with me to Winnipeg and split the gas and the expenses. And I gathered all my gifts for my daughter, went to Winnipeg, and I was going through central states to Mexico on my holidays.
And why was it the Vancouver police knew about you at all? You had been in Winnipeg before?
That year, I really can't recall, even though I read the newspaper articles in the paper.
Yeah, it might not be fair, but it'd be accurate to say that you did have, many years ago, a minor record which might have put you in the files.
Yes, in police files, yes.
And some policemen in Winnipeg thought, I've seen that guy's face before, and they came, right? Something like that.
Something to that effect.
Tell me, where did they come and pick you up in here? Was it at your sister's house in Burnaby?
Yes.
Do you remember that night?
I remember that day.
Tell me about it.
Through the whole week, they had been coming and talking to Tom and this Detective Bernard. And then Detective Bernard said, well, there was, you know, 2 officers or detectives from Winnipeg coming to Tom, it would be okay. And I said, fine, you know, come to the house. They came. They asked Tom to go down with them. Tom said, oh, okay, you know, will I be back in time to go to work? They said, oh, you know, no problem. So Tom went, and he never came back.
Did they take you to Winnipeg without a warrant?
Yes.
You were not arrested?
No.
You had not been charged?
No.
What made you go?
They're police officers.
Just the very presence of the police?
Yeah.
When you at that time were fully convinced that you'd be checked out and brought back?
Exactly.
Tell me one other thing. On the identification, one of the witnesses identified you from a series of pictures and a picture lineup. Can you tell me about that picture lineup?
A photo pack gallery of 9 photographs. There were 8 photographs, mugshots together, hard, thick, cardboard construction, all taken indoors with a light. None were with hats on. They were only from bust up.
And your picture?
Was taken on a Polaroid. 2 Polaroid pictures were stapled together. A border around the Polaroids were not the same as a border around a mugshot. The police mugshots have. It was taken at nighttime. I had my sheepskin coat on, my cowboy hat, and it was in back lane at nighttime.
Number of standard mugshots plus special pictures of
myself.
Of Sophonow.
Yes.
So obviously, whoever looked at that said, that's the man.
If they looked through it, nobody said that's the man.
Nobody
said that is the man.
Have you considered a lawsuit
Presently,
against the Winnipeg police?
my only consideration and my priority is Minister of Justice. That's my priority. And any other avenue that I can get through bypassing Minister of Justice.
Despite the remarks of the Court of Appeal, which was unanimous in acquitting you, they didn't say new trial, they said acquit you.
Exactly, yes.
It would seem that the authorities in Manitoba are still determined to attempt to go for a 4th trial.
They're just covering their asses.
That's the best way you can put it, they're covering their asses.
That is the only way I can put it. Logically.
So you're not yet considering suing for false arrest?
Not right now.
When you were freed, when were you freed in Winnipeg?
December the 12th, 4:05 p.m.
Did anyone have the grace to say, here's your plane ticket to Vancouver?
No, my lawyer gave me $100, and friends of mine, Mr. and Mrs. Jones in Headingley, gave me $200 for a plane trip ticket because they couldn't see going back Christmas to Vancouver on a bus. So they gave me another $200 to...
So they kept you in jail for 3 years and 9 months. The case was demolished in the final analysis by the Court of Appeal, and they said, here's your hat, what's your hurry?
I walked out with a garbage bag with my clothes in it.
What lies ahead for Tom Sophonow?
I'm en route to Toronto to write a book, and that should take about 6 months and be on the market publication this time next year.
And then perhaps you'll go back to your old job of landscape gardening and doing the odd part-time doorman.
Yes.
How do you feel now?
I'm very happy.
You're not quite over the last hurdle, but I should imagine you're both pretty confident.
Yes.
My thanks to you, Tom, and to you, Irene, and the very best of luck. Now we're going to deal with the Vancouver, well, it's a national story, but the Vancouver aspect of C-49, the new law for hookers, after the break. What's your proper title? Head of the Vice Squad. Inspector Harold Brittain, Vancouver City Police Force, is in charge of the Vice Squad. It's not quite like Miami Vice, but it's Vancouver Vice, and we have all the same ingredients. We have drugs and we have vice, don't we?
Yes, we do.
The key question, Inspector Brittain, after all the fuss and furor and the final presentation and legality of Bill C-49 about the prostitution on the street, simple soliciting, when are you going to start, shall I call it, a crackdown enforcing Bill C-49?
We'll be enforcing soon.
Soon?
Soon. I'm reluctant to announce a time and a date, partly because we don't enforce this type of thing under the glare of the publicity that's liable to come with that kind of an announcement. But we have been holding discussions with Crown Counsel to determine the best evidence pattern and assigning the manpower and sort of planning our enforcement campaign. So very soon we will be enforcing.
And of course you've had lots of time over the past couple of years of confused legalities and the Debbie Hutt case to identify all of the regular hookers on the streets of Vancouver so they won't be difficult to find any time.
Well,
or to identify.
Whether we know them or not, they aren't usually that difficult to identify.
Now, there have been a number of criticisms in the House of Commons that this particular law will be widely used in contravention of what is broadly called freedom of speech. Do you see a wink, a nudge being evidence, or what basic evidence will you be looking for in a prostitution charge and hopefully conviction?
Well, the very best, the strongest evidence would be evidence of a conversation that takes place between a customer and a hooker, or between a customer and an undercover police officer, or a hooker and an undercover police officer. That's the strongest evidence that we could produce.
In other words, the kind of evidence which says, do you want, how'd you like to have some fun for $50?
That's right. That's right. And Section 195.1, which is the soliciting section of the code, which was covered by Bill C-49, lays out a number of sort of things that can take place, but they must all be for the purposes of engaging in prostitution.
Could you tell me what they are?
Stop a motor vehicle, stop a pedestrian, impede the free flow of pedestrian traffic, impedes the exits or entrance of a premise adjacent to a public place, stops a person, attempts to stop a person, but all for the purpose of prostitution or engaging the services of a prostitute. And so this would remove any possibility of two people having a conversation on the street and being suspected of soliciting under this code.
In other words, it's all specifically limited to the purposes of prostitution.
Specifically limited to the purposes of prostitution.
A question which comes to my mind, I don't know if it's a proper question or not, is what if this conversation takes place on private property? Like in the entrance to an apartment block or on a Safeway parking lot?
Well, they would still be public place so far as the public having right of access, and I don't think that would be a determining factor, but each and every case will be examined by Crown Counsel prior to a charge being proceeded with. Mm-hmm. So this is another check and balance, if you want to call it that.
You'll obviously have difficulties where the gal with the miniskirt or the fancy clothes is standing in the corner, a car pulls up, stops briefly, and the girl jumps in and goes, and if the car is not an undercover operator, there's no way you can get evidence on that particular occasion, is there?
Well, no, we would not have conversation. There may be other ways we can follow up and investigate that type of a scenario. However, we're not going to get every incident of soliciting on the street because that's just not possible.
Of course it is. Do you think that it will fulfill desires, it would seem, of Parliament and the majority of the public and clear the streets from what we've had, to exaggerate, hordes of prostitutes in various places?
I think it's already worked. The number of prostitutes on the street is definitely reduced. However, we're in at the Christmas season when our experience says that during the Christmas season it is not as busy because the customers either are at home or they don't have the money, or business slacks off in the middle of December to the middle of January.
Is the West End still covered by the common law injunction of the Chief Justice?
The injunction still stands, yes.
And as far as we know, that'll continue to stand?
That is, yes, there's no plans that I know of to cancel that injunction, so it's still in place and it's still effective.
And when we had the kind of spectacle of the barricades going up to keep the cars away around 2nd and Quebec, there'll be no need for that anymore, will there?
Well, those barricades haven't been in place regularly for a while, but it shouldn't be necessary now to barricade streets to keep the problem down. And let's face it, as the news showed last night, if an identified police car comes by, the prostitute's on the move. So it's effective in that way. It makes it more difficult for them to work.
When I was a street reporter in downtown Vancouver in what you might call the bad old days, before the worse old days came as far as hookers were concerned, I always took it as axiomatic that where there were prostitutes, there were pimps. Is that still, broadly speaking, the case?
Yes, it's true. There are pimps, and there have been. This new law isn't going to change that any.
None whatsoever?
No.
And if a new girl appears on the street, one of these moments she gets involved with a pimp and has to turn over her money and...
There's a possibility. I don't think all the girls work for pimps,
No.
but a good number of them do.
Probably a number of the younger ones don't to begin with, at least in any case.
I would think they probably hope not to, but because it cuts into their revenue, there's no doubt about that.
Are we still having the American hookers crossing the border like we used to have on the circuit?
That hasn't changed. Again, we go back 7 years to when I was in Vice in 1979 and 1980. We had exactly the same situation then we have now. Exactly the same.
And do you think that this will now return us to the case where the hookers will be forced inside to deal in the pubs and the bars and the clubs?
It's a possibility. Certainly, prostitution isn't going to be ended. However, our number one priority is the nuisance on the street, and we'll be addressing that first. If there's a problem created elsewhere, if it surfaces elsewhere, then we'll be looking at that as well.
Will your target be equally against the John as against the hooker?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
No doubt about that.
No doubt about that.
Whatsoever. When a girl solicits, when a person, God knows you can't talk about girls only these days, when a prostitute offers sex for sale in a pub or a club, will that similarly be monitored and action taken by your department?
Yes, it would be our intention to enforce wherever there is a problem created. There is the means at hand at the present time under the Government Liquor Act for clubs or pubs or licensed premises to regulate. You know, if some activity is becoming a nuisance, they can deal with it themselves under the Government Liquor Act.
Well, I can't ask you if you're looking forward to enforcing this new law, but do you think it will achieve the objects desired?
It appears very straightforward, and yes, I think we'll have some impact with this.
My thanks to Inspector Harold Brittain of the Vice Squad of Vancouver. Want to take some phone calls?
As long as they're clean.
We'll see if there are some phone calls on C49, which we can put to Inspector Brittain in the next segment after the break. One of my friends lives in a place where they're bothered fairly steadily with hookers. Is there any point in phoning up the police department? What number would you use if you've really got a hooker problem outside your door? Should we bother you by phoning you up?
Sure, yes. And the 911 number gets the communications center, and depending on the demands for service, they will send a car around. If someone wants to phone the Vice Squad and say, look, I've got a problem in front of my building, on my corner that's persistent, then I really think they should phone the Vice Squad, and I can give the people that number if they would like it, and they can phone directly into the office, and we'll record that information and deal with it in our enforcement.
What's the number?
665-2177.
But if you've got, say you've got some hookers, customers and hookers, creating a disturbance and fighting and screaming and yelling.
911 is the number.
911 is the number to do.
And that'll get a uniform, the patrol response, which...
it'll stop it for the moment.
Stop it for the moment.
If not forever.
Right.
Go ahead, please, to Inspector Brittain.
Hello there.
Yes.
Now tell me, this has been going on for thousands of years and all this, but, and the inspector said he'll deal with the problems once they crop up. Well, I wonder if you clamp down so hard that this creates a lot of rapes, and the ladies who don't work the street are starting to get abused by the potential customers who do want their services.
That speculation, that I don't believe that was a problem in previous years when enforcement was done, and I don't see that as being a problem.
Thank you. Remember in the good old days, the bad old days, there used to be the vagrancy section of the code where a woman being a prostitute wandering abroad at night could be lifted without evidence.
That's right.
Other than wandering abroad and unable to give an account?
Failed to give an account of herself.
Failed to give an account of herself. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello. I'd just like to make one quick comment. Is this a case of just moving the girls around to another area and they're not, I don't feel they're really dealing with the problem?
Well, the police are not a social agency as such.
No, the only thing is if we do enforce in an area and the prostitutes move to another area, then we move to the other area to enforce. The idea is to curb the nuisance on the street, and that's what we'll be addressing.
Be discreet, don't use the street was Mayor Harcourt's never to be forgotten moral philosophy on the problem. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the only way they're going to keep it off the street is if they quit kicking in hotel doors. When they kick in hotel doors, they give people no chance, but no choice but to go on the street.
When they kick in hotel doors?
I'm assuming they're talking about enforcing
Vice Squad, yeah,
common
in
body
hotel
house,
rooms
common
and
body
that
house
type of thing. It should
situation.
be legal to have sex in a hotel room.
Well, here again, you're dealing with what is legal and what isn't legal, and the police don't make the law.
Right, and of course the fact is, and I know enough of this myself to say that to live off the avails of prostitution by pimping or running a body house is clearly and distinctly illegal and still illegal under the Criminal Code of Canada, is it not?
Yes, it is.
One can phone an escort service, I suppose.
It's been done.
But you're still taking a chance that that particular service might be at that moment being looked at as the prospect of living off the avails of prostitution.
Yes, again, that's a possibility. We haven't done an investigation into escort service for a while, but I don't say it won't be done.
No, and the case in Victoria made it clear the woman was fined $900 or something for that particular offense under the Criminal Code. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Inspector. You know, the ironic part of this whole situation is that by the sound of it, we've gone full circle. If you'll think back to, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, when we had the controversy with the famous PH Club downtown, the various bars and so forth, the liquor board stepped into the picture, you people stepped into the picture, police commissioner stepped into the picture, he drove the girls onto the street. So now basically you're driving them back off the street and back into the clubs and the hotels. So, you know, what's your comment on that?
Well, to start with, the prostitutes were on the street prior to the famous case you're referring to.
Oh, not in the amounts that they are today. I mean, my God, it came to a point recently where you couldn't walk down Seymour Street without being accosted.
Yes, that's true, but the population in that 10 years has increased, the number of prostitutes have increased in a number of circumstances, and they don't all relate to one incident in a club.
Yeah, but so what seems to be the great drawing card with Vancouver? Is it the lack of police activities or the freedom that they can come and go? I mean, you know, we hear about these pimps crossing the border day and night. We hear about prostitutes coming up for weekend specials. I mean, how the hell do they get past the border?
Well, if they don't have a criminal record, they're allowed to come into the country to visit, as far as I know. And I'm getting into an area that I don't deal with.
You don't deal with
immigration.
Although I remember when they used to go up in trucks at the weekend to a club down in Gastown. But that would stop to that particular time. Thanks, caller. We're going to Comox? Go ahead from Comox.
Yeah, I was wondering if you can honestly stop the problem with this new law, because, you know, it's the oldest profession in the world. I wondered if old Harold there has ever been to Amsterdam.
I've never been to Amsterdam.
Well, they've got a red light district there.
Well, I've been to Amsterdam, and the whole situation there is quite repulsive. You've got 2,000 hookers in the red light district, and you've got 2,000 hookers outside the red light district, peddling drugs and whatever else with great abandon. Inspector Brittain, we shall look forward and be on the alert when you start the crackdown on the hookers. It will be soon.
It will be soon, Jeff. Thank you.
My thanks to Inspector Harold Brittain, head of the Vice Squad of Vancouver City Police. I'll be back with the free-for-all after the break. How I spent my Christmas holidays. I went to Hawaii, I went to Maui, I played golf at Kapalua, I had 5 good rounds, and a number of unspecified rounds and enjoyed myself thoroughly. Back at work this morning. Is it always a bit of a culture shock after the holidays? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
I'm a new arrival to BC from Ontario, and I have been watching your program every morning since.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I saw your program when you were up fishing at Port Alberni. Could you please tell me, Mr. Webster, what month was that when you caught your big tyee? Because I want to go fishing, too.
It was August the 30th or thereabouts, 1984. It was a simple matter. Anyone who throws a line into the water in the Alberni Canal at the right time can pull out a 34.5-pound spring salmon. There is absolutely nothing to it. It's the simplest sport in the world, and I strongly recommend the Alberni Canal at the end of August, the first week in September, not only for spring salmon, but for sockeye salmon, which, contrary to popular belief, can be boated, I think you call it, on a hoochie-coochie.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster. Keep up the good
And
work.
I got my 34.5-pound salmon put into 57 6-ounce cans of the most beautiful salmon in the world. And I got to tell you, I prefer freshly canned salmon, nice and juicy, to all the baked and poached salmon in the whole world.
Good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. Bye.
Everyone should have had caught a 34.5-pound salmon in their lives. I've never caught a fish before this summer, really. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Yes, I was curious about if you have any information regarding these body rub houses and so forth, regarding the prostitution.
A number of escort services, as we well know, in Victoria and Vancouver, are accused of being covers for prostitution. There were some body rub houses in downtown Vancouver which were the same. I don't know if they're still there or not. Why do you ask?
Well, I worked in the downtown core, and I've seen about 2 or 3 different body rub houses. And I was just wondering in regards if there is any truth to the prostitution that takes place in those outfits or not.
Well, there certainly used to be. But all of them face the prospect of being charged with pimping. You see, people keep telling you that prostitution by itself is not illegal, but soliciting is illegal. And having a stable of prostitutes and taking 80% of the money from them and supplying them with drugs, which is not uncommon, is a very serious criminal offense and one of the terribly bad side effects of those who are prepared to tolerate prostitution. I don't think we should. I think we should keep the clamp on it as much as we can. And to those who say making whorehouses legal, I say a pox on your whorehouse.
Yeah, the facts are great. Thank you very much, Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I didn't mean to do a double entendre there, but I did more or less by accident. A pox on whorehouses. There's Stanley giggling again. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Spence.
Pardon?
Good morning, Mr. Spence.
Mr. who?
Oh, what's his name?
Webster.
Mr. Webster, I'm sorry. As I am a visitor from Manitoba, and I went to see the trials of Mr. Sophonow.
Oh, yeah, you went to Sophonow's trials, okay.
I certainly did. And the first one could have actually closed the case because I think they've forgotten that an expert went to the shop and looked at Barbara's body and looked at everything about Tom. And he said that there was no way that Mr. Sophonow had ever been in that donut shop because there was skin on the floor and they never analysed it. There was a cigarette butt on the floor and they never analysed it. And he said that...
there was chewing gum on the floor?
Yes, and skin of somebody's face or neck where she tried to protect herself. He also said that there was a hair in Barbara's hand and it was not Tom Sophanow's. And right there and then, I knew that Tom was innocent, but he kept on and on and on.
There was incredible political pressure because another young girl some time before had been murdered in Winnipeg too.
There's been a lot of girls murdered since, Mr. Webster. A lot of girls have been murdered since in Winnipeg, 16-year-old girls.
Well, it would certainly seem that the police investigation had a hell of a lot of big holes in it. And to go for a fourth trial seems a little bit beyond the pale now.
Don't you think they've spent enough money already?
Sure have, I'll tell you. And thank you very much for your call. My name is Webster. You spell
yes,
it...
I know. I was so nervous I got mixed up with your name.
W-E-B-S-T-E-R. I'm Graham...
Mr. Webster, I'm trying so hard to get in touch with Mary, Tom's mother, because we became very good friends.
All
she
right,
was so lonesome and everything, you know, and upset. And I can't get the phone number.
If you'll give your telephone number to Jeanette, we'll give your telephone number to Tom,
and
he can give it to his mother. Now, just don't hang up. Whatever your name is. Mine isn't Sven.
Yeah, my name's Joan.
Okay, Joan. I'll call you Helen. Is that the break? Is that the break? Already? First day of work almost over, apart from preparation for tomorrow. Webster's the name. And I'll be back. No, I'll be back after the break. I'm full of New Year's resolutions this year. You know, the usual ones. Back on the Petrofina diet. Stop smoking. No alcohol of any kind at any time. That's the easy one. It's the smoking that's the tough one. Good programs, lots of enthusiasm, smiling, happy face. Number of people who said I looked good in that program with David Frost and Brian Adams because I was smiling instead of glowering. This afternoon I'm going to go do my own walkabout on the SkyTrain, and we'll have that on tomorrow morning. Webster on the SkyTrain at 9 a.m. precisely.
Expo 86. 116 days to go.
Webster on the SkyTrain at 9 a.m. precisely. I'm probably the only person in Vancouver who hasn't been on the SkyTrain, but I'm going to correct that and be on the SkyTrain with Webster at 9 a.m. precisely.